Throughout many of the videos I've made about JoJo Heritage for the Future, I've explained what makes a lot of this game's roster very unique. Oftentimes it came down to the inventive ways that Capcom translated a set of abilities from the manga into a moveset, and oftentimes they succeeded in making the game's roster memorable and faithful. There is one exception though, a character where the very premise of their existence is something that I imagine ended up being the big roadblock in designing a moveset. Of course, I'm talking about Iggy. Iggy out of the original JoJo's Venture roster is my pick for the character that likely created the biggest challenge for the developers, other than maybe Midler. See, Iggy presents a unique characteristic not just amongst the Heritage for the Future roster, but fighting games in general. He's a dog. Not just any dog, he's a tiny Boston Terrier, and he also happens to have a pretty abstract stand ability. Iggy is not the only dog to be playable in a fighting game roster, but his species, small size, and powers of his stand, the Fool, are all aspects that converge to make him one of JoJo's most distinctive characters. Iggy is a character with a kit that stands out because much of his playstyle comes from using stand on and stand off in harmony to cover for the weaknesses of both states. He's got some very strong tools and a highly unorthodox game plan that can be just as effective as it is annoying, but also some glaring flaws that heavily weigh him down despite the system mechanics that are on his side, being an active stand character. See these videos for an explanation of all that. He's ultimately a strange character, but we'll get into that in a bit. Let's start at the very basics. The first oddity contained in Iggy's design should be fairly obvious. Man's is tiny, but honestly you're a crazy person if you were expecting his stand-on hurt boxes to be accurate to the size of his sprite. They are slightly extended above his body, which is especially noticeable when he crouches, but even accounting for this, he still stands as the shortest character in the game. His diminutive size is one of his biggest advantages, as many characters' usual offense straight up doesn't work on standoff Iggy due to many buttons whiffing on him, and some of his own buttons further reduce his hurtbox, making him pretty damn annoying in this state. He also boasts commendable mobility, with incredible walk speed, a run instead of a regular forward dash, a solid back dash, and some stand-on tools I'll touch on later. Unfortunately, he also has low defense, so it'll take a lot less punishment to make him croak, although this is somewhat offset by his fast wake-up speed. Iggy's tiny size suggests a rather annoying presence in neutral, something that's supported by the state of his standoff buttons. His tiny hurtbox may provide him a crutch in terms of hurting other characters' offense against him, but his own offense isn't exactly very threatening given that this small size also causes a severe lack of range on his buttons. Still, there's some interesting stuff here. His 5A isn't particularly great. It's only 5 frames startup, which is okay, but its incredibly tiny hitbox means you need to be insanely close for this to connect, and it can't be linked out of anything, ultimately making for a pretty worthless normal. Thankfully, he has 2A to make up for it. 2A is a great button. It's faster to start up than 5A by 1 frame, and the range is actually quite good. It hits very low to the ground, but the hitbox goes deceptively far. The pushback makes comboing out of it a bit difficult, but it can be linked into a few buttons, including stand 5A. It's also your main normal to spam during tandems, but be warned, you will tire of that farting sound which plays literally every time you use this normal. Still, the sounds of flatulence are well worth it. 5B is unfortunately another rather poor button. Not only is it pretty slow to start up, but it takes forever to recover and the hitbox is really small. However, it does also low profile like crazy and it has lots of forward movement, which makes it pretty good in cross-under situations. Iggy's 2B is a slide, which travels a decent distance and also shrinks his hurtbox significantly, allowing for yet more low profiling, and believe me, this will go under a lot of stuff. As a slide, its utilities are fairly consistent with other similar moves in the game. By itself, you'll find that while it is special and super cancelable, it's also fairly unsafe on block and even hit. However, it also has a ton of active frames, meaning it's fairly easy to improve the frame advantage by meeting with it, which is the act of timing the move so you connect with a later active frame. As a result, it can be a very strong Okizeme tool, although I'll go into all of that in greater detail a bit later. For now, let's talk about 5C, which is one of Iggy's more unique normals as it has 2 different versions based on proximity with 2 very different types of utility. Far 5C is one of his best normals thanks to its incredible range. It reaches very far, with the distance complemented by the space between the hitbox from the hurtbox making it borderline impossible to counterpoke. The whiff punish potential makes it one of his best neutral tools in standoff, but unfortunately it's not super rewarding. It's super cancelable but only into tandems or 236S, so you basically don't get anything off of it if this move connects besides the raw damage. Also, it gets fucking wrecked by jumps as the hitbox isn't suited at all to anti-airing. Close 5C is a bit of a different beast. At a close enough distance, 5C becomes a tall vertical button that hits 3 times. The most obvious use of this is anti-airing, which it does quite well thanks to the disjointed hitbox. Just be careful because it is a proximity normal, so if the opponent's jump isn't close enough to you, you'll end up getting far 5C, which will more than likely get you punished. Best to save close 5C anti-airs for deep and close jump-ins to ensure it comes out. His 2C is a fast normal that launches on hit, and while it looks like a good anti-air, the hurtbox is horrendous, making it ill-suited for that purpose. It does have some use as an Abare tool thanks to its fast startup, but as a whole it's just not that good. Iggy's air normals are a big part of his standoff neutral thanks to his hyper hops. His air normals notably share the same animation and startup, as well as all having infinite active frames until Iggy lands. The major difference between the three being damage and the fact that JB and JC both have 2 hits. JC has more damage and a better hitbox, so it tends to be Iggy's jump-in of choice, and it's really solid thanks to the aforementioned lightning fast startup and the hitbox. His dash normals also share similar animations and frame data between them, but none of them are particularly great outside of his 1 dashing low, which is basically the same as his 2B, but with a bit more range. Iggy also has a command normal in 6B, which is an overhead. It's fairly slow at 21 frames startup, but it does make for a nice Oki tool since it's super and special cancelable. Now before we move on to stand on, we have to highlight Iggy's very strong grab. This throw is one of the best in the game, and while the effects of the throw itself do contribute to that, it's also that way because of Iggy's walk speed. Iggy has no problem weaving in and out of throw range with ease, allowing him to sneak in grabs at very deceptive ranges, either raw or via tick throws. Iggy's grab game is very strong as his throw causes a hard knockdown, allowing him to go for Oki, but I'll get into more detail on that later. Now Iggy's stand on is interesting. As I mentioned, Iggy in Stand Off has a very small hurtbox, which is a genuine blessing for the character. Contrasting this sharply is Stand on Iggy. Damn son, now that is what you call a hurtbox. This big ugly thing just juts out of Iggy, dramatically increasing his size. I'd say he's fighting on equal footing, but I don't even know if that would be accurate given how insanely wide he gets. Now it's not like this is something unique to Iggy. Lots of characters actually get slightly taller when going into stand on, but with Iggy the difference in height is way more staggering given how small he is without his stand. However, the disadvantages of his stand on size are compensated for in many ways. First off, stand on Iggy has incredible mobility. While his walk speed is worse, he now has many ways to travel the air. In place of the usual stand-on double jump that most active stands get, Iggy instead has a hover. It's more relevant for his offense, but it's nice to have in general as it stalls his air momentum. More importantly, Iggy in stand-on has an air dash, and that means he can do instant air dashes, IADs for short. Combining this and his hover, Iggy's maneuverability and mix-ups in stand-on are super good. Instant air dash buttons are one of his best approach options thanks to the range of some of his normals, and he can use the hover for similar things. Seriously, you can do his air normals real close to the ground with this thing. On to his normals though, stand 5A and stand 5B don't stand out much. The former chains into itself like most lights do for stand-on characters, which makes it easy to hit confirm into for damage, and the latter is a situational anti-air. Stand 5C, now this normal really stands out, just not for the right reasons. Looks pretty good, right? I mean, just look at the animation. Let's hit the replay on that. Yeah, this is the move's real hitbox. So obviously, any hopes of this being a decent poke are ruined by the fucking atrocious hitbox, which is hiding comfortably inside the gigantic hurtbox. What should be a very strong poke is incredibly easy to counterpoke unfortunately, giving this normal really limited utility. Thankfully, we have some strong lows to make up for that garbage. Stand 2A and Stand 2B are his fastest stand-on buttons at 4 frame startup. Stand 2A is strong mainly for hitting low, and with how fast it is, it perfectly complements Iggy's IAD overhead pressure, allowing him to make his mix-ups all the more threatening, especially since both can be used to convert into combos. Stand 2B on the other hand is an excellent poke and counter poke thanks to the hitbox. Stand 2C is his sweep, and as far as sweeps go, it's not great. The big problem is that it doesn't actually knock down, even against standoff characters. That right there makes it pretty useless, but there's an alternative version of the move that activates at the end of Iggy's stand-on chain combos, and that one actually does knock down. Much better. Stand 6C is a command normal that acts as another strong poke. What sets it apart from his other options is the sheer amount of active frames. It's a bit slower than something like Stand 2B, but gives you more range to beat approaches from further away. Although for some reason it does less damage than Stand 2B. Kinda weird. Iggy's air normals are very good. Obviously IAD approaches are an important part of his offense, and his air buttons are well suited to that purpose thanks to the ranges they cover. Of note is that Stand JB and Stand JC have the same startup, but JB hits way higher, so it's better suited as an air-to-air or tech chase option. Stand JC is a great approach out of regular jumps, hover cancels, and instant air dashes. Oh yeah, there's also Stand J2C, which is essentially a dive kick. It's a little weird because on hit it will only knock down if the opponent is standing, so getting hit by this while crouching essentially makes it punishable even on hit. It does halt Iggy's momentum, so you can potentially use it as another mix-up tool to change your trajectory in the air during an air dash. You'll probably notice that a lot of these buttons in Stand On and Stand Off are strong as defensive pokes, and that definitely is indicative of Iggy's playstyle, as are his specials. Besides his command grab and teleports, Iggy's two other main specials are charge, which means he'll be spending a fair amount of time holding back, especially for his combos. But before we get to any of that, let's talk about sandballs. While Iggy is in his hovering mode, pressing any of the three buttons will fire out small sand projectiles, with the button strength determining how far out they fly. These are maybe his strongest tool for offense and defense. The sheer speed with which they come out makes them very strong. There's no animation associated with the sandballs being released, so they effectively have no startup, and they travel downward very quickly. Sandballs are excellent as a zoning and stalling tool, and that's mainly because of the properties of Iggy's hover. While Iggy is in this state, he can still air block, so there's very little risk to tossing these things out as you'll block most air-to-air attempts. Just be careful not to turtle too close to the ground, as you may end up getting anti-aired by a button that's air unblockable. Now the reward for these things hitting isn't amazing. On their own they do pathetic damage, but the ability they have to keep people at bay makes them very strong, and many characters struggle to really get their game going when Iggy is away in the air smothering them with balls. As a pressure tool, it's also really strong. A very common Iggy offensive sequence is to jump an air hover, toss out a sandball, and then cancel the hover into a normal. On top of the already strong mix, the sandballs add extra frame advantage and chip damage that's very valuable to him. Sandballs are an Oki tool, a pressure extender or starter, a zoning and laming tool. You can use them defensively when landing from a hover to cover yourself. They're just really strong and easily one of his most valuable tools. Sand Crush is one of two charge specials and behaves a little differently depending on your state. Stand Off sends the Fool flying forward, basically like a projectile. This has the advantage of offering Iggy a much longer reaching attack than anything he really has access to in Stand Off. Being able to check people from this far is appreciated, but there are some drawbacks. For one, it does extremely low damage, and you can't really combo off of it from a distance as you're usually sending it out while moving backward and charging. It's even less rewarding than his other main standoff poke Far 5C, which need I remind you doesn't require charge at all. For 2, during the move's recovery period, Iggy is locked out of any moves that use his stand. That doesn't just mean not being able to go into stand on, it also locks him out of both versions of 5C, 2C, and all of his specials. He can still use 6B though, even though that button presumably uses the Fool Sand as well. Little weird, but anyway, this lockout lasts an alarmingly long time, which leaves Iggy extremely vulnerable, especially since it also locks him out of blocking. Also, the Fool has a hurt box while traveling. The stand-on version has Iggy move alongside the Fool when charging. At first glance, it's just a standard combo ender, and to its credit, the damage off of Iggy's chain combos into Sand Crush is actually pretty good. The problem comes from the frame data. This move is punishable on hit. This is obviously a pretty big detriment for his main combo ender. The main thing offsetting this is the high pushback on hit, which leaves some characters unable to punish it because of distance, in spite of the frame data. Considering this, you can still use this as a combo ender depending on the matchup and whether your opponent knows what to punish the charge with, but if you're in a situation where you can be consistently punished for using the charge, then make sure to exercise extreme caution when using it, because it isn't exactly a strong endorsement for the character when his own B&Bs can get him killed. His other charge special is a much simpler affair. Sand Uprising is mostly just an anti-air. It's fast and the angle is favorable, but unfortunately it's not air unblockable, so it doesn't do much against empty jumps or hops. The stand-on version is also invincible on startup, giving it merit as both an anti-air and a reversal. 623X and 421X are both teleports that send Iggy in opposite directions. Iggy can use this both as a way to escape the corner or cancel it out of certain unsafe normals like 2B to try and avoid a punish. You can be punished for this, but since there's no real way to tell whether Iggy is going to teleport forward or backward, it's easier said than done. There's no difference between the stand-on and stand-off versions, oddly. Iggy has a command throw. It's a little different from something like Old Joseph's, being much slower and also allowing for a combo while the opponent is in the animation, during the stand-off version anyway. It's an excellent tool for Iggy's Okizeme, which I'll talk about in a bit. Iggy has two supers besides his tandem. 236AA, Big Sand Wave, a comically self-explanatory name. In any case, this is a great super. There's an initial slam at the beginning of the super before said Big Sand Wave is summoned and travels across the entire screen. Iggy can move alongside the sand, allowing him to pressure behind it, making it quite an excellent super to bolster Iggy's offense. The mix is simple but very effective thanks to Iggy's walk speed. Just keep a few things in mind. First, you can jump or roll through this super. It's not particularly hard to time, and it's a big factor in the second issue with the super. Iggy can't block while the sand wave is out, so he's very vulnerable if the opponent avoids it. Similarly, this means the super can be rendered much weaker by certain reversal supers or guard cancels, so be wary of that when using this in neutral. Still, as a pressure tool, it's pretty fantastic, and the damage you can potentially get from it is really nice. The stand-on version has Iggy lay on the sand while it travels, meaning you get no pressure and substantially worse damage, not to mention being unsafe on block. Way worse than the stand-off version, so don't bother with it. Iggy's other super is a raging demon with all the same quirks. Slowly travels along the ground and on hit activates a cinematic that for some reason is covered up by TV static instead of just cutting to white or black. It even has a similar input. The obvious issue is that this can be jumped after the flash, and while there are setups to make the mix a little less hard to just up back, it's ultimately better suited as a combo ender than anything else. So, as I've tirelessly explained, Iggy has a pretty wide kit with lots of different tools, but how exactly do you put these tools to use? Iggy is a little strange because while a lot of characters' playstyle in Stand On and Stand Off tends to be very similar, Iggy doesn't really fall into this mold. Remember, he has the tiniest hurtbox in the game in Stand Off, and that changes in Stand On. When it comes to playstyle, Iggy is very versatile, but in order to wield that versatility, you must master his two very distinctive playstyles. In Stand Off, your mix-ups and damage are fairly unremarkable without meter, so you're primarily playing the slow game with his strong pokes like Sand Crush and Far 5C. His small hurtbox is a big advantage in many matchups, as characters who can rely on moves he can low profile, like Jotaro's Stand 2A, will have to structure their pressure very different when he's not using his stand. Much of your damage is either going to come from hit confirming into and doing mix-ups out of 236AA, or from Iggy's Oki. Iggy has a strong and varied Oki game with lots of different ways to mix the opponent, and there's a few ways to set it up. The most common option is through his throw. As I mentioned earlier, his fast walk speed makes it very easy to land plenty of grabs in Stand Off, and it does cause a hard knockdown that gives you lots of frame advantage. The amount that you get varies between character to character due to wake up speeds being different amongst the cast. Oki that works on someone like old or young Joseph may not work on Abdal, for instance. Iggy has a rich amount of options after a grab. You can use 2B and 6B, which hit as a low and overhead respectively, to meaty, and since both can be cancelled in the super, Big Sand Wave or Tandem allows you to cash out for good damage off the situation and get another knockdown, potentially looping into another Oki situation. You can also meaty with the likes of Sandball or Close 5C. The latter actually enables an unblockable setup. If you can get the opponent to block Close 5C, you can cancel it into your Tandem and input 2A. While the Fool performs 2A, you can hit with a jump in on the same frame, which is a very practical setup that works on almost the entire cast. The most prolific Iggy Oki's MS setup involves his command throw. I told you I'd talk about this eventually. Iggy's command throw, while not really working as a conventional mix-up tool, is the basis of some very strong Oki. Since he can run alongside the dogs as they're moving, it's possible for him to pressure behind it with a button, and if this button is blocked, the command throw will grab them during the block stun. The best part is that since Iggy can combo off of his command throw, he gets mad damage for what's honestly a pretty silly setup. It is the most character-sensitive post-throw Oki setup though. The command grab itself is 15 frame startup, so against characters who wake up faster, it straight up will not work, which really sucks. The command throw also launches on hit, so you don't really get a setup off of it. No vortex for this little pup. This all sounds really powerful, especially off of a simple grab, but there is a particularly big catch. It concerns a property of Iggy's throw itself, particularly in regards to the block-only frame. It's been a little bit since I discussed that little quirk of the game's engine, so let's get into it. In Heritage for the Future, when a character wakes up, there is a single frame where a character cannot act in any way other than blocking. Anything you input, be it a super or a button, is going to be ignored until after the block-only frame. This means you cannot perform wake-up supers in this game if your opponent hits you with an attack on the block-only frame, with some exceptions mainly in regards to throws. This applies to most everything that causes a knockdown in JoJo's, except Iggy's grab. For whatever reason, Iggy's specifically is exempt from this rule, which means opponents waking up after getting thrown can jump or reversal super out of Iggy's Oki. The reason this sucks is because certain Oki setups already don't work on characters with fast wake-up speeds or good pre-jump, so the guessing game becomes even more dangerous when characters like Avdol or Polnareff can potentially kill your setup by just holding up. The knockdown from Iggy's throw seems to be slightly different to other knockdowns in terms of wake-up timing, as some characters with fast wake-up speeds in all other knockdown situations will wake up slower after Iggy grabs them, which is a really odd inconsistency. Now, does this make Iggy's throw Oki unusable or impractical? Of course not, but it's important to keep in mind that you can't just turn your brain off and command grab Oki or 5C unblockable every character or player to death. If you can make all the right reads though, or you're just against someone who doesn't know they can super your ass, Iggy can absolutely run a train over your opponent. Stand on is where things get a little different and Iggy becomes the aggressor. It's kind of like an inverse of Polnareff. Pol uses stand off for his mix-ups and rushdown, and stand on for turtling and anti-airs, while Iggy sort of does the opposite. The irony of both being charge characters isn't lost on me either, although thanks to Sandballs, Iggy does have pretty good stalling even during his aggro phase. The real attraction of this mode though are his mix-ups with instant air dashes. In both stand on and off, his combos are on the shorter end, and his main combo enter in stand on can potentially be punished on hit. A lot of his integral damage tools like Big Sand Wave and the command grab are also much worse in stand on compared to stand off, so your main damage tends to come from constant high-low harassment. Sandball usage is also important, of course, and allows Iggy to both continue his pressure or turtle and control the air if need be. You really want to get good at using these things because they are invaluable to Iggy whenever he has a stand on. You also, of course, lose the ability to low profile anything. So that's the general gist. In stand off, you use your fast walk speed and strong pokes to run a slow game, peppering in throws to run Oki, and using Big Sand Wave to confirm into big damage, while in stand on, you use your constant air dashes to run nasty mix. Honestly, it's pretty admirable how this character ended up panning out in terms of design, but his unique nature amongst the roster comes with its fair share of issues that result in most considering him a pretty middling character. Some of these are pretty obvious across his two states. Iggy tends to switch between stand on and stand off a lot because of the different strengths of both, but this means his gameplay can be rather inconsistent, especially in matchups where the primary strengths of his different modes can be countered. Iggy's grab Oki being exempt from the block only frame rule makes it highly inconsistent, and means that fighting characters who wake up fast enough to avoid stuff like command grab Oki makes the reward off of one of his strongest tools, his throw, much weaker. Sure, Iggy can just stay in standoff to neuter his opponent's offense, but if they get the life lead, he's going to eventually need to get in. You can't just stay poking away at mid-range forever. In stand on, your main goal is to use your instant air dash to mix people up and your sandballs to pressure or turtle. The problem is that having to approach via the air leaves you at the mercy of your opponent's anti-airs. If you're fighting a character with bad anti-airs, go wild, but against characters like Avdol and Midler who can check your air dash shenanigans with tools like Avdol's DP or Midler's cars, you're gonna have a lot more trouble getting in. You can't really approach from the ground as his dash normals are pretty poor and his walk speed and stand on is much slower. Iggy has his fair share of tough matchups and problems, and he's not the most popular character because of how strange he is, but he's much stronger than I ever thought. The thing is, Iggy being so uncommon is actually a big advantage of the character because of how unorthodox he is. His small hurtbox and standoff changes the way characters have to play, and he has a large amount of ways to knowledge check opponents who don't know better, mainly with his throw Oki. Although I suppose making a video detailing why it's not that strong kinda counters that. Iggy players, if this video results in your throw Oki being less successful in the future, then I apologize. Iggy takes genuine effort to make him work, and there are characters who do a lot of the same things he does better, but this character can still be a force in the meta, and even win tournaments. Frosty Fausting's 2024 Heritage for the Future tournament. The victor of this tournament was one PH Balls, who took the entire thing home using Iggy. Keep in mind he was faced up against the likes of Modest Latios, a very good Chaka player, and Gary Butternubs, who played Polnareff in Grand Finals. These can be tough matchups for Iggy, so the fact that Balls was able to come out on top is impressive and a testament to the potential Iggy has, annoying little scamper he is. Personally speaking, when I got into the game last year, this was a matchup I experienced a lot and I found it annoying as hell. It is annoying, because you have to change how you play the game so much against standoff Iggy, but this character is capable of so much more than just being an irritating gremlin, even if that is part of the package. Iggy is a very unorthodox character and still pretty unexplored, so it's good to see people still pushing him. A major shout out to go to all the players that discovered all the tech and nuances that have helped this character develop, namely in regards to things like the frame advantage Iggy gets from his grabs. This character is a grab bag of weird, and it was a lot of fun learning how he plays. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching, have a great night, and take care. Hey everyone, this is the part of the video where I thank all my YouTube channel members who are all beautiful and amazing. So thank you to Old Man Han, Cammy the Killer, Jazba, Mortis, Arg Seals, Wormy, Terry Hints, Perfect Orange, Pet Shop from Fortnite, Happy the Hap Hap, HPHK, Gundog92, Isaac the Collector, Kira the Stowaway, and Gerald Say. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing that last one right. Anyway, thank you all for the support. I really appreciate it. You're all lovely. Kisses to all of you. Thank you for watching. Have a great night and take care. I'm out.